I'm Joanna. From an early age, I was the quiet one of the family, as my father used to say, with a tone that carried a hint of criticism. He appreciated bold, loud people, those who took up space, like my younger brother, Josh. We grew up in a modest home in Riverton. My father, Michael, owned a small grocery store, and my mother worked part-time for the city, mostly because of her health insurance. My childhood wasn't terrible, but it wasn't warm either. I learned early on that affection in our house was transactional. If you wanted a compliment, you had to introduce yourself, and if you weren't Josh, you had to work twice as hard to get half the attention. I was a voracious reader, always curled up in a corner with a book or doodling in a notebook. I got straight A's without being asked. I didn't cause trouble. I didn't sneak out. I didn't drink. I had dreams, but I kept them to myself. Anyway, I didn't think anyone was listening. Josh was different. Always charming, always joking, always pushing the envelope. He barely passed his grades in school, but my dad loved his spirit. That's how you get there, he would say, not by being a plant on the wall. I remember a dinner party my senior year of high school when I nervously told them I'd been accepted into a top-tier business program. Full of hope, I asked if they could help with the tuition. There was a long pause. My mom looked down at her plate, and my dad cleared his throat and said, "Joanna, we're proud of you, but we just can't afford it right now. Maybe you could work for a year or two first, save up some money." I nodded, tried to smile, and told myself I understood. 2 months later, Josh turned 18. That same week, he wrecked his used car in a drag race. I came home one afternoon to see a shiny new Mustang parked in our driveway, a brand new red convertible. I felt dizzy. At dinner, I didn't say a word, just sat there, fork poised, while my father rambled on about how a man needs a car to match his ambition. My mother passed the salad in silence. I remember watching the steam rise from the mashed potatoes and thinking how nothing in my life would ever taste warm again. That night, I cried in the shower, not because of the car, but because I realized something deeper. I didn't matter, not to them, not really. I was the safety net, the backdrop, the one they would call if they needed help, but not the one they would help. And yet, I said nothing. I took out loans, worked late at a coffee shop and then at the college admissions office, slept 4 hours a night, and still aced my exams. I didn't go home much. When I did, everything revolved around Josh, his new job, his new girlfriend, his big ideas. I kept quiet for years, but what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the girl they discarded was slowly building something, brick by brick. And one day, the same man who laughed when I asked for help would come knocking on my door, begging. College was harder than I imagined. Not because of the classes, but because I was carrying it all alone. The other girls in my dorm got care packages, weekend calls from home, surprise visits from their parents. I got monthly emails from my mom, terse and polite, updating me on how things were going. One time, Josh got into a bar fight and broke his wrist. That prompted a phone call. I didn't bother telling her when I made the dean's list or landed a competitive internship. I knew better than to expect applause. The internship changed everything. It was at a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago. For the first time, someone saw value in me, not just my grades but my ideas. I worked late without being asked, took notes in meetings no one told me to attend. At the end of the summer, the CEO called me into his office and said, "Joanna, you're sharp. If you ever need a job, call me." I didn't cry until I got back to my apartment. Back home, Josh had crashed the Mustang again, this time drunk driving. They hushed it up. My dad paid for the damages and made excuses. "Kids make mistakes," he told me on the phone. "It's just a phase." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. By my junior year, I was tutoring freshmen and juggling 2 part-time jobs. I learned to save every penny, eating rice and beans for weeks so I could buy a nice blazer for interviews. I kept a journal, not of feelings but of business plans, product ideas, marketing angles. I studied people the way other girls studied fashion trends. Meanwhile, Josh dropped out of community college, tried real estate, and dropped out too. My dad let him come home to find himself. He gave him a small loan to start something of his own. That something became a failed t-shirt company and then a failed auto body service. Each failure was someone else's fault. Once, during Christmas break, I caught Josh laughing with my dad in the garage. They were talking about how emotional women get when they can't make it in business. I left before they noticed me. That vacation, I made a decision. I was no longer going to beg for a place in their world. I was going to build my own. After graduation, I didn't go back home. I took the first offer from the consulting firm in Chicago, an entry-level position but with a decent salary. I rented a studio apartment with peeling paint and rats in the walls, and I loved every inch of it. No one called to ask how I was settling in. I stopped expecting them to care, but I hadn't forgotten every sleepless night, every ignored achievement, every silent betrayal. I remembered, and I wasn't done. The first year in Chicago was brutal but exhilarating. In Chicago, I was an anonymous person in a city that didn't care whether I succeeded or failed, and I loved it. Everything I earned was named after me, and mine alone. At work, I soaked it all in. While others clocked in at 5, I stayed behind, analyzing reports, watching senior consultants deal with clients. I kept notes in a worn leather notebook that I never left my sight. I wasn't chasing success, I was studying it. 6 months later, I was assigned a project that others had turned down, a local company in decline trying to modernize its operations. The owner was exhausted, the staff was unmotivated, and the books were a mess. But I saw something there. I dove in, revamped logistics, digitized systems, trained staff. We turned things around. My manager noticed. "You have a nose for it," he said. "You don't just solve problems, you see 10 steps ahead." For the first time, I believed it. Meanwhile, back home, Josh had already squandered 2 more business ideas. My dad kept pumping money into him. Investments, he called it, while reminding me in brief, transactional messages to call my mom sometimes. My mom never answered when I called. Then came the wedding. Josh had met someone, a girl from a wealthy family. Her name was Erica, beautiful, elegant, and blissfully unaware of the mess she was getting herself into. The wedding was grander than any our town had hosted in years. My dad took out a second mortgage to make everything right. I was invited out of obligation. I went because I wanted to see them, to see the look on my dad's face when I arrived in a crisp navy suit I had bought with my own paycheck. No +1, no drama, just me, all in one piece and standing tall. The reception was in a rented ballroom, with white tablecloths, an ice sculpture, and a band flown in from St. Louis. My father gave a speech that made me sick to my stomach. My son Josh, he's a dreamer, a builder, a real man who goes after what he wants. I stared at my glass of water as if it might shatter from the tension in my hand. No one mentioned me, not once. Erica smiled sweetly at everyone, and I wondered if she even knew about the drunk driving, the failed business ventures, the heated arguments behind the garage. Probably not. She clung to his arm as if she didn't see the red flags fluttering in the wind. That night, I walked back to my hotel alone. I stared at the ceiling until dawn and made a promise I didn't dare say out loud. One day, they would remember my name, not because I forced them to, but because the world would. The morning after Josh's wedding, I flew back to Chicago and didn't look back. I dove into my work like it was oxygen. I volunteered for difficult projects, led internal workshops, and began to build a small but loyal network of mentors. I didn't try to charm people, I just delivered results. While others were vying for visibility, I focused on execution, and people noticed. At 27, I was promoted to senior consultant. I began leading small teams. I wasn't flamboyant, but I was effective and a good listener. Clients trusted me, my colleagues respected me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. It was around this time that I began to notice gaps in the way companies were being served, particularly women-led startups. They were being underadvised, underfunded, and constantly overlooked in boardrooms. I knew what that felt like. I started taking private calls on the weekends, offering free advice, referrals, introductions. At first, it was just to help, but then it became something more. I started to see patterns, problems that repeated themselves across industries. I wondered, what if someone built a consultancy that didn't just plug holes, but taught women how to build their own ships? That idea took root and stuck with me. Meanwhile, Josh's life was starting to show cracks. Erica left him 3 years later. She packed her bags and moved back in with her parents. I heard about it from my mom, who sent me a cold email asking if I would consider calling Josh. He was going through a tough time. I didn't respond. I was busy finishing a pitch deck. It turned out that Josh had accumulated a lot of debt, failed investments, personal loans in his name and my father's. The car had been sold. The house was almost auctioned off. I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. I just felt tired of the messes he made and the way I was always expected to care. I hadn't been home in almost 4 years. One Friday night, as I was locking up my office, I found a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. Voicemail. I listened to the message in the quiet of the lobby. "Hi, Joanna, it's your dad. I was wondering if we could talk. I have a proposition. A few things have changed. Call me, okay?" He sounded smaller, like he was chewing on something sour. I stared at my phone for a long time. I didn't call him back, not yet. Because the company I was quietly, methodically building was about to launch, and when it did, the world would no longer be able to ignore my name, especially him. The night before my company's low-key launch, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and tried to remember the last time I'd felt fear. Not nervousness, the kind of fear that shakes you inside. Maybe it was the night I told my dad about college. Maybe it was when I signed my first loan document. Maybe both. But this felt different, because this time I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't waiting for approval. I was leading. We launched on a blustery Tuesday morning. No glamour, no champagne, just a small, clean website, a modest office, and a team of 4 brilliant women who believed in the mission, consulting for entrepreneurs who were tired of being ignored. By Friday, we had our first client. Within 3 months, we had 12. The real turning point came 6 months later, when a national magazine ran a story about women who were reshaping businesses. I was on the cover, under the headline "Joanna Carter, the Quiet Strategist." I sent a copy to my parents' address. No note, just the magazine. A week later, I got another voicemail. "Joanna, we saw the article. Your mother cried. I'm proud of you. And, well, about that proposal I mentioned, we could really use your help." No apology, no acknowledgement of the past, just a request buried in flattery. I didn't delete the message. Instead, I waited. I had time now and influence. I finally called back 2 days later. My dad answered on the first ring. He sounded almost humble. He said Josh had defaulted on several loans, the family home was for sale, and the grocery store, my father's pride and legacy, was on the brink of bankruptcy. He said he'd tried everything, but he just wasn't good with numbers. He said he'd heard I knew how to fix things. I asked him a question. "Are you asking for a favor or a job?" Silence, then a job. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. "Well," I said, "send in your resume. Our team is hiring, but just so you know, we don't have titles like father or son of the owner around here." The silence on the other end was a sound I'd waited a lifetime to hear. Not triumph, not revenge, just recognition. And that was enough for now. When Michael arrived at the office for his first day, he was wearing a suit that was too formal for our environment. His shoes were polished and his face was clean-shaven, as if he were trying to wear dignity like armor. I met him in the lobby myself. "Good morning," I said. "Good morning, Joanna," he replied, his voice too low, his eyes avoiding mine. I led him to his desk, one of the smaller cubicles in the back, between 2 of our younger analysts. It was organized, functional, just like everyone else's. "Rafaela will bring you up to speed," I said. "We are restructuring the logistics model for a regional client. This should be familiar territory for you." He nodded, no questions, no thanks, just a tight jaw and quiet breathing as he sat down. It was surreal to watch my father trying to fit into a world I had constructed. At lunch, he stood awkwardly by the refrigerator, unsure if he could join the others. I watched from my office window as Rafaela, half his age and twice his confidence, invited him in with a warm smile. Old Michael would have dismissed her, but now he nodded and followed. Josh showed up 2 weeks later. He hadn't called or emailed ahead of time, just walked through the glass doors with a half smile, his sunglasses still on his face, like he was walking into a club. My assistant called me. "There's a Josh Carter here, says he's your brother." I almost laughed. I walked out of my office and saw him leaning against the front desk, flirting with the receptionist. Josh, I said, to what do we owe the pleasure? I heard the father is working here now, he said, spreading his arms wide as if it were a joke. I thought there might be room for me, too. I blinked. And what exactly are you offering? He scoffed. Come on, Joe. You know I'm good with people, marketing, networking, you name it. I can add value. I looked him up and down, still dressed like he had something to prove, still relying on charm and confidence that had earned him nothing. Send me a resume, I said dryly. If anything fits, we'll be in touch. His smile faltered. Really? He left without shaking my hand. That night, Michael stood near the elevator. Was this really necessary? He asked. He's having a hard time. I turned to him. I've been too for years. You've never given me anything for free. Why should I start giving it to you now? He didn't argue, just nodded. And that silence wasn't surrender. It was understanding, finally. Josh didn't disappear. A week after his unannounced visit, I learned from HR that he had submitted a basic resume that conveniently omitted his string of failures and inflated his role in the strategy of the family business. He even listed entrepreneurial leadership as a skill. I took a quick look, rolled my eyes, and handed it to my hiring manager with a single note. Treat as any other external candidate. No special treatment. It was rejected 2 days later, but that didn't stop him. He started showing up at our public networking events. At first, it was harmless, having a few drinks, mentioning my name, socializing with clients he had no business approaching. He told one of our junior consultants that he was consulting behind the scenes, and another that he and I were talking about forming a new division. He wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. When I confronted him at a Saturday panel we were co-hosting with an alliance of female founders, he smiled as if we were sharing a private joke. Relax, Joe. Just making connections. This isn't your playground, I said, my voice low but firm. You don't belong here. Stop implying otherwise. He raised an eyebrow. Wow, power suits you. I didn't think you had it in you. The words were meant to hurt, but they didn't, not anymore. What hurt was watching Michael slowly shrink away. He came in early, stayed late, did his job quietly. He was respectful, even helpful, but there was a heaviness to him, a slowness that hadn't been there when I was a kid. I could see it. When he walked past the front desk and Josh's name tag was still there, untouched, I saw it. I saw him walk past my office door and not knock. One night, I caught him looking at the company value sign in the hallway. Bold white letters. Integrity, accountability, vision. He turned when he noticed me. You really built this, he said quietly. I nodded. I did. There was a long pause. I didn't make it easy for you. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the apology was no longer the point. The past didn't need to be rewritten. I had survived and overcome it. But the future, that was mine now, and Josh wasn't going to take a piece of it just because he'd run out of wreckage to cling to. The incident happened 2 weeks later. It was during a major presentation, a collaboration between our company and a high-profile technology client. Months of work had culminated in that moment. We were in a glass-walled conference room, the kind where everything echoes. Voices, glances, judgments. Just as we were about to begin, I noticed something odd. Josh was standing outside the conference room, chatting animatedly with the client's assistant, pointing inside, gesturing in my direction. I excused myself, stepped outside, and heard him say, I've been advising the team on this project since the early stages. Joanna is the executioner, but I helped shape the idea, you know. It was a blatant, reckless lie, and worse, it was planting seeds of doubt minutes before a crucial deal. I interrupted. Josh, can I speak to you privately? His eyes flickered to mine and then back to the assistant. Hold on a second, Joe. Just explaining the context here. He followed me down the hall, smug as a child who thinks he's getting away with something. The moment the door closed behind us, I turned to him. You just lied again on my company property during a client presentation. He rolled his eyes. Relax, it's not like I'm trying to hurt you. I'm helping you, boosting the brand. No, you're exploiting, I said. You're sabotaging something you had no part in building. You've made it clear that you don't respect what I do, but now that it's successful, you want to claim it. His smile faded. Don't do this, Joanna. I'm your brother. You were also the reason I starved through college while Dad bought you a second car. You were the one they rooted for while I disappeared. And now that I've made it, you think you can just walk in and take it." He blinked, perhaps for the first time seeing me clearly. "If you ever misrepresent yourself as part of this firm again," I said slowly, "I will ban you from every event, every partner space, and every professional circle I'm in. And believe me, I'm in more places than you can imagine." He left without another word. I walked back into the room, straightened my blazer, and made the presentation as if nothing had happened. The client closed the deal within 24 hours. Later that week, Michael came into my office. He sat across from me and clasped his hands. "I didn't know he was going to do this," he said, "but I should have known." I raised him, didn't I? I stared at him for a long moment. "No," I said, "he made his own choices, just like you're making yours now." His voice trailed off. "I see it now. Everything I missed, everything I ignored. I can't take it back, Joanna, but I can be different now if you'll let me." It wasn't a full apology, but it was real. It was deserved, and for once, it wasn't too late. The silence that followed was different. Josh stopped showing up. No more networking events. No more unexpected visits to the office. His name disappeared from my inbox, from whispered conversations, from the lingering guilt that clung to the corners of my mind. But I knew that silence didn't mean peace. It meant withdrawal. Michael, however, was different. He kept coming to work, kept asking questions, volunteered for tasks others ignored, and even started mentoring one of our interns. He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't, didn't try to impress anyone, just showed up day after day, as if he was trying to make up for lost time the only way he could, by giving what time he had left. One afternoon, I found a manila folder tucked under my office door. It was from Josh. Inside was a handwritten letter, messy, tear-stained in places. He said he was leaving town, said he didn't know who he was other than Daddy's golden boy, said he envied me not for my success but for my strength, for surviving when no one else had offered a lifeline, for building something when everyone else had taken it. He didn't apologize, but he said goodbye. I closed the folder and sat in my chair for a long time. Later that night, Michael knocked. He'd never done that before. "May I?" he asked, standing in the door. I nodded. He was silent for a moment, then, with shaking hands, he reached into his pocket and slid something across my desk. It was my old college acceptance letter, crumpled, faded, folded 100 times. "I saved it," he said. "Every day I didn't help you, I held it in. I told myself I'd do better next time, but I didn't." I looked at the paper, at the ink that marked a turning point no one else had seen. "I'm proud of you, Joanna. Not for the company, not for the title, but for never becoming what I was." And that was it. Not a grand gesture, not a movie ending, just two people, one finally seeing the other, finally being seen. The first time I was introduced as CEO at a national summit. In that moment, I stood behind the podium, in front of an audience of women who looked nothing like my past self, but represented everything that was my future. I didn't talk about profit margins or projections. I talked about silence, about how for years I thought silence meant strength, keeping my head down, surviving alone, pretending it didn't hurt. But then I learned that silence also hides injustice, that speaking up, setting boundaries, and expecting respect is not a betrayal, it's a birthright. I ended my speech with a standing ovation, and when I walked off the stage, Michael was there, standing in the back, just watching. He didn't say a word, he didn't need to. A few months later, we expanded our office, opening a second location in Detroit, our first official location. I gave Michael the option of staying or helping set up the new location. To my surprise, he chose to go. "I want to see something grow from scratch," he said, "without old ghosts on the walls." He left with a box under one arm and a photo of the team in the other. I walked him to the elevator. We didn't hug, we've never been that kind of family. But he held my gaze and nodded. "I'll send you an update," he said, and he did. As for Josh, I don't know where he is now. The letter was the last I heard from him. Sometimes I wonder if he's started over somewhere, if he's learned to listen, to try, but I'm not holding my breath. And I don't hold my anger anymore, because the life I've built is no longer a reaction to what they didn't give me. It's a reflection of what I've given myself. One morning, I opened a package in my office. Inside was an unsigned card and a copy of my old student ID. On the back, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "You did it, even when we didn't help." Especially then. I keep it framed on my desk, not because I need the reminder, but because I deserved every word, every scar, every step. What did you think of Joanna's story? Tell us in the comments. If you liked this story, please like and share it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories.